Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. The subject that we're going to be talking about today is the murders taking place in Juarez, Mexico. I have had several students in the last 2 years who were directly impacted by what is happening there. One of them was a young lady whose husband, 21 years of age, was killed in Juarez, left her with a 2-year-old son named after him. Others of my students have seen people killed in their front yard or places of business where they happen to be. It's a tragedy that is taking place in Juarez, Mexico, and other parts of the country. I have with me today a special guest, Charlie Minn. He's a movie director from New York City, and I had him on this show for an interview a year ago. I believe it was January of 2010. This is now 2011. The program at that time we discussed was a movie entitled Nightmare in Las Cruces. And it was about the killing of people at a bowling alley in Las Cruces in 1990. Charlie Minn is back in town now. I remember when I interviewed him, I asked him the question, do you have any projects that you would like to work on next? And he said, yes, I'd like to do a movie about what is happening in Juarez, Mexico. So I have Charlie back. He's back in town. Charlie, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're now directing and producing another movie, and this time it is really about the murders in Juarez, Mexico.
Yeah, it's called 8 Murders a Day, and I felt the need to make the film after examining the violence while I was shooting A Nightmare in Las Cruces. 2010 was a horrific year in Juarez, 3,111 murders, which came out to 8 murders a day, and that's why the title is 8 Murders a Day. That's the title of the documentary. And when you consider in 2007, the city of Juarez averaged less than 1 murder a day, and now it's 8 murders a day, how can that not get your attention?
Now, I noticed that you have a cold, and I was just commenting a little bit ago before we started. I know why you come into the Southwest, Las Cruces and El Paso area to make movies, is to get away from those hard winters up in New York.
Yeah, it's brutal in New York.
Okay, wish you well. Hope that you get over your cold very, very
Thank
quickly.
you.
But at least we're going to have you here to talk about this, about when did you really start putting this together and projecting exactly what kind of film you wanted to make?
I would say when I first came down in the fall of 2009 while I was filming the Bowling Massacre film is when I became deeply interested in the subject matter. I mean, how can it not get your attention when every other day you're reading about just mass slayings all over the city? So it was a pretty intense process just reading up on everything and actually going down to Juarez. So from about fall 2009 right up until the taping of this show, it's been a lot of research, taking trips into Juarez, whether it's day or night, talking to a lot of people, and trying to get to the bottom of what is the greatest human rights disaster in the world today.
I should mention that I had you come and speak to 3 of my classes this morning. They were all on American government, and I asked the question, how many in each class were from Juarez, and several in each class were from there. And then I asked the question about how many of you have relatives in Juarez. Nearly every hand went up. And then the next question, how many of you have been directly impacted in some way or another through friends or relatives injured in what's happening there? And many, many hands went up. How did you feel about it when you saw it that way? It is spilling over into affecting people in El Paso.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a sad state. I mean, the mental scars that all these murders have left behind is enormous. And I was deeply affected by just about every hand went up in the classroom. And it's hard to find anyone in the city of El Paso that doesn't know someone who is affected by this tragedy. We're so close to Juarez, just a mile or 2 away. And a lot of people in Juarez are fleeing into El Paso. So the overlap is enormous. So there's a lot of people deeply affected by this.
I also asked the question, how many of you from this side of the border have quit going to Juarez in the last few years? Lots of hands went up. A majority in each of the 3 classes today said they have quit going there. So it's having an economic impact.
Absolutely. I mean, the trepidation factor is huge. People don't cross the border like they used to. That bicultural influence that we have here in El Paso has been taken away to a large degree, and it's such a sad state right now. And based on my research, I don't see the situation getting any better.
Some of the students ask, and I don't want to make the whole interview about what the students were asking, but I was going to ask the question of you for the program anyway, about gathering up crew to go over to Juarez. You actually went to Juarez filming this documentary. And tell me something about the crew that you rounded up to go with you. And the question that many of the students had was, were you afraid to go for your own safety?
I wasn't nervous. I would say more concerned than being nervous. I mean, it's human nature. How can you not think about what could happen to you?
Right.
But in terms of getting a crew, it was very difficult to find cameramen who had the courage to go with me into Juarez because of of course, the safety factor. But I got lucky that I was able to do a ride along with Canal 44, a very powerful independent news operation in Juarez. I was also able to go in with Univision. So I think it's dangerous if you just go into Juarez alone and you don't know the streets. So I did have some assistance, and certainly I owe a lot to the Juarez media for their cooperation.
Now, you've seen a lot of news reports, even in New York City, about this, and CNN has had some programs where they've talked about this. And I think you told me you've already been on CNN about this new movie.
Well, CNN mentioned the bowling massacre film.
Oh, okay. They were doing a review or update on that one.
Yeah, but certainly I'm anticipating coverage on 8 Murders a Day, this new documentary I made.
Right.
I see it on CNN and Fox News Channel quite a bit. But I just got back from New York and Los Angeles, and they were both able to grant me interviews. Going to cities where there's a lot of Mexican people, and in New York and LA, there's certainly a lot of Mexican people.
Now, we're trying to get this particular program on the air, if possible, by February the 5th. We start this series and sequences of showing this program, and I hope that we can get it on the air on Saturday, the 5th of February. Tell me about where the movie is going to be premiered. Where is it first going to be shown? And then where are some other places where you're going to have the movie?
Yeah, the movie's coming out on Friday, February the 18th at the Bassett Place Mall here in El Paso. And I'm going to find out any time now whether it's going to also be showing at the Carmike, which is by Cohen Stadium where the Diablos play. And by the time people watch this interview, I would have known that information. It's also going to be showing in Las Cruces and Deming on February the 18th. It opens on the 18th, and it will play for as long as, just it depends on the box office, how many people come out.
Right.
And then on February 25th, it's going to play in Tucson and Tempe, Arizona. The fact that it's playing in Tucson is quite interesting because we know what happened there a few weeks ago with the shootings in front of the supermarket. And I found the reaction by our country to be interesting when you have this mass shooting in Tucson, and that goes on every day in Juarez, Mexico.
And that was an attempted assassination of a U.S. representative, in that case in
Gabby.
Tucson. Yeah, Gabby Giffords, exactly. So how do you feel about this? That El Paso is noted as one of the safest cities in the United States in many studies, and in contrast is the murder capital of the world just across the river. What's your response to that?
Well, that's touched on in the documentary. I mean, El Paso was rated the safest city actually in 2010. Only 5 homicides, which I think is just an amazing stat in a good way. And then you have Juarez, which had 3,111. And that's a documentary right there, 3,111 against 5.
Right.
And I think there are a few reasons for that. I mean, the police presence here in El Paso is very, very big. And I mean, when you consider that hardly any of the murders in Juarez are investigated, why would you commit a murder in El Paso and there's a very good chance you'll get caught, but in Juarez, just a few feet away, the case won't even be investigated. Right. So I think that's another reason why the discrepancy is that big.
Well, that's a problem of loss of faith and trust in government institutions. The judicial system corrupted, the law enforcement system corrupted, the politicians corrupted. makes it very, very difficult to deal with this issue. Do you have any answers for it?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, the situation in Juarez, it's so corrupt that from the police force to some people think the mayor is working for the Juarez cartel. I mean, there's a huge trust problem in Juarez from every level, top to bottom, side to side. And, you know, here in El Paso, we don't have that, thank God.
Right.
But, I mean, two different countries, two different governments. Not that USA is clean as a whistle, but certainly the situation in Mexico, it's been known to be corrupt for many, many, many decades, but it seems to have exploded in the last few years, and as a result, we've seen the spike in the violence.
You're an independent filmmaker. Isn't that kind of frightening in itself, trying to raise the money, get the crew together, promote the film, such as you're doing perhaps through this particular venue? How do you deal with this? And you've traveled, you have expenses when you travel Los Angeles from New York, and you go to Tucson, Phoenix, and other places. Tell us about that, of putting together a documentary that you're going to be proud of and that you can afford to do.
I think there's a risk in anything you do. I mean, as a filmmaker, you follow your passion and your heart. And I know that I would have had deep regret if I never made this film. It was too close to my heart because Mexico has been a big part of my life. I lived in a lot of cities in the United States where there's been a lot of Mexicans, like Fresno, California, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Las Cruces, El Paso, Los Angeles, New York. I think Mexico is a beautiful country with beautiful people, and unfortunately right now they're going through a very tough time.
Tell me about some of the people that you interviewed for this documentary. I know that in the other documentary about Las Cruces bowling alley massacre, who were some of the people that you interviewed for this movie?
We have some outstanding people in this documentary. I was very fortunate to get some of the people that I got. From the El Paso Times, Daniel Barunda, he covers the crime beat. Diana Washington Valdez, right, who has written books on the femicides. Right. She's has a wealth of knowledge on the subject matter. And then we have some acclaimed authors like Charles Bowden, who wrote Down by the River. We have Molly Malloy, a librarian / historian up in Las Cruces. We have solid journalists. We have cameramen who put their lives on the line. We have people from El Diario. So I was very lucky to gather all these people and have them speak about this. UTEP professors like Dr. Howard Campbell, Dr. Tony Payan. These are all individuals who are extremely knowledgeable about the greatest human rights disaster in the world today.
Do you ever feel that you might be threatened by making this movie? You know, journalists have been killed in Mexico, and some are right now asking for asylum to come over to this country. Let's deal with that one too. How do you feel about people that are seeking asylum to get out of their country?
I can't blame anyone right now who wants to leave Juarez. I mean, with the current state it's in, I mean, you're talking about around 8 murders a day. This is, in my opinion, not a war on drugs, but a war on people. I mean, I compare this to the DC sniper back in 2001, where at any given moment, anyone can get shot in the head. So, I mean, when you're talking about, we've had 2 babies slaughtered in the past month, an 8-month-old baby and a 4-month-old baby. If that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will.
I've had Diana Washington Valdez on this program, and she teaches part-time government classes for us at Community College. And her life is threatened because of things she's written, especially about the women's murders in Juarez. And one of the most dramatic episodes just recently was a mother of a woman who was killed as one of those young women and was fighting for justice for her and was just herself killed. Why don't you tell us about that?
This case, what I believe her first name was Maricela, epitomizes what Juarez was in 2010. A few years ago, she lost her daughter, Rosie. Rosie was dismembered, she was burned, and her live-in boyfriend at the time confessed to the murder. And for whatever reason, he was let go by 3 Juarez judges who, I'm sure a lot of people will say were corrupt.
Yeah, for whatever reason.
For whatever reason. And that seems to be a very popular term in Juarez, for whatever reason, unfortunately. And so for 3 years, Maricela was out for justice for her daughter. She would petition, try to get signatures, she would lobby, protest, do whatever she could to have her voice heard for her daughter. Maricela was a role model. She was a human rights activist, she was a nurse. She said, I don't want to see one more young woman slain in Juarez. So she drove 3 hours south to Chihuahua, and she was protesting in front of the governor's office for 3 solid days and nights, trying to get signatures so that her voice could be heard for her daughter's brutal murder. And one day, 3 days into her camping out, you might say, in front of the governor's office, some coward pulled up in a white car. And what's so heartbreaking about this is all caught on tape. Anyone can see this. Some man comes out and has a brief conversation with Rosie's mom, and you actually see Rosie's mom run for her life. She's running across the street, running for her life. The coward chases her down, shoots her 3 times point blank in the head. So here's a woman who dies while trying to find justice for her daughter. And if this movie wasn't called 8 Murders a Day, it would be called No Justice. So, and that kind of epitomized how everything went in the state of Chihuahua in 2010. It was just a disastrous year. And like I said, this is not a war on drugs. This is a war on people.
Right.
And supposedly, and I say supposedly because more than 95% of the crimes are not solved in Juarez, this is a battle between 2 drug cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Juarez cartel, over this coveted smuggling route into the United States through El Paso. But again, because of a lack of investigation, we're not exactly sure if that's exactly why all these murders are happening. Is it really 2 drug cartels fighting over this turf space?
In New York, we hear it here, I'm sure you hear it in New York, that the United States has some blame in the problems in Mexico, because the U.S. is such a big user of drugs of all kinds. And then it is in the U.S. that many of the sales are made where guns are smuggled into Mexico. Did you deal with this in your movie?
Yeah, we talk about that. This is a shared problem. There's no question about it. USA's hunger for illegal drugs is intolerable. And it's no secret that all the guns and all the cash coming into Mexico is coming from the States because of our hunger for these illegal drugs. So the drugs are going north and the cash and the weapons are coming south into Mexico. There's your problem.
Right. Now, know that the issue, like Maricela and Rosie, this is gory. So you have to show some of this violence to make this a meaningful documentary. But you also have to have some sensitivity to this so that you don't make the audience totally queasy about this terrible thing that is happening. Don't you notice that a lot of people just don't want to hear much about this subject, talk about this subject?
I think there's a lot of fear. I think as a director, though, I have to find that balance. I have to find that right tone, the right pacing, the right taste, so that you don't want to alienate your audience. I think the audience, especially in the borderland, knows how serious this topic is. I don't know how informed they are. I don't know how much they know about it. I don't know how much they care about it. I'd like to think they care about it, but it's not like I've walked around and taken a poll. But what this film is going to do is it's really going to educate and inform people and hopefully make everyone think deeper about the terror that our neighbors are going through right now.
Do you think nationwide that people are sensitive at all to this situation? They hear about Mexico, the violence in Mexico, but you have been deeply touched enough to want to make a movie about it. What about the rest of them that you are around in New York City or other places you go to?
I think the media as a whole has done a poor job covering the violence. Of course, if you're in El Paso, you'll hear enough about it through the local media. I think the Juarez media is the gutsiest media in the world. Canal 44, El Diario, Univision, They've done an outstanding job covering a very barbaric event. But if you go to Kansas City, Missouri, if you go to Portland, Maine, I'd be surprised if they even heard of Juarez.
Mm-hmm. What was the hardest part of this production, putting it all together, directing it, writing, scripting, whatever you want to do, and then actually producing? What was the hardest part on this?
Making sure that my cameraman showed up and he didn't change his mind due to fear.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there was always, we had some people drop out, and I literally had to find someone like the day of. Mm-hmm. So, and you know, you're always concerned about getting the shots that you need.
Right.
And the times I went in there, there were no shootings right in front of us, which is a good thing. But then again, when you're making a film and you want to show the audience what's going on, so I was almost caught in between. Yeah, you're happy nothing's going on, but then what are you going to show? And that's where the Juarez media was very, very good to me, like El Diario, Canal 44, Univision, and I had a lot of local help from KVIA, the ABC affiliate here in El Paso, KTSM in El Paso, Channel 9. So it was definitely a collaboration.
Do you do any of the editing on the film here, or do you send it all back to New York for editing and putting sound in, narration?
Everything's done back in New York, and okay. I'm in El Paso now because we're so close to the release, and I have to be here to get the word out, but my editor and I were in contact every day.
Okay, you've been also speaking to classes at UTEP as well as community college. Mm-hmm. What about that? Have you asked for a show of hands, as I asked my students, a show of hands about the impact of what's happening or any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's affected UTEP perhaps even more. I mean, don't forget that a couple of bullets hit their campus last year, and then 2 UTEP students were brutally slain, 38 rounds. I believe it was in November or December of 2010, and that certainly left a mark on UTEP's campus. So, like I said, this has left a deep scar for so many people. Just because you're not one of the people who died doesn't mean that you're living with it in some form, because as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of people who know someone directly affected by it, or you know someone who knows someone, or there's a family member or an aunt, uncle, whatever. I mean, we're so close to one another, we almost touch, that there's a really good chance that you know someone that's affected by this.
We keep talking about the drug cartels and the traffic flow of the drug cartels, but also I know some people here in El Paso in the criminal justice system, and I know one person I visited with in jail. He's now in the state penitentiary. And some of them also believe that poverty is a big aspect of this, that some of these people are so desperately poor there, they're resorting to extortion, kidnappings, arson or threatened arsons and things in order to just get some money for themselves. Do you deal with this in your film?
Yeah, that's discussed, and that's really the root of the whole problem, is the poverty issue. I mean, if you have to feed a family of 5, and of course the Mexican government has done a poor job giving their citizens opportunities and wages and good job opportunities, I call a lot of the criminals in Juarez reluctant criminals. You're almost doing it out of necessity because you're so desperate, because you can't make money to feed your family, so you'll do something that you don't want to do, and you know it's wrong, but yet you'll do it anyway because you need to feed your family. So a lot of people are in for the take, and it's spiraling out of control.
And that's the reason many of them get into the drug trade, or they become hired assassins or anything else. We're hearing here lately that even the age level is going down of the people that are committing some of the most horrendous acts.
You're right. I mean, just when you feel sorry for the youth, all of a sudden the sympathy towards the youth turns into, oh, wait a minute, they're part of it. So it's almost like you don't even feel sorry for them anymore. So you're almost like, I mean, you're right, it's gotten much younger now. I mean, there was a national story of, I believe, a 13-year-old who admitted beheading about 4 people. So yeah, I mean, it's getting a lot younger.
Well, this has been a very sad show. There's no doubt about that. We have only 2 minutes left. Is there any ray of sunshine or hope in the midst of all of this tragedy?
I wish I could say that there is, but based on my research, I have no reason to point to anything to say that, yes, this is going to go down.
You don't think the people will move out into the streets and try to change things, change the government? Do you?
I would love to see that. I would love to see everybody in Juarez leave their house and rally and protest and march and come together in unison, but again, there's that fear factor.
Right.
You know, no one wants to speak up. They're worried about getting shot. So, I mean, there's the problem is now 3 years deep, and the corruption is just building. It's a virus that's just uncontrollable, and something has to put an end to seeing all these dead Mexicans on the street with a hole in their head. Oh. It's absolutely beyond comprehension what's happening, and it has to be fixed immediately.
And it's Mexicans attacking Mexicans.
It's Mexicans killing their own people.
Oh, that is so tragic. And we do want to close on this particular thought. Those of us that work here in El Paso, and particularly at community college, we have deep love for Mexico and for the people of Mexico, because so many of our students are from there and so many of our friends. So we do want all of us to combine together with thinking about, praying for Mexico, and especially for Juarez, Mexico, that things will get better in the near future instead of worse. That's our prayer for Mexico. Charlie, we're glad to have you here again.
Thank you.
Such difficult circumstances and a very difficult story. We wish you and your film well.
Yeah, and the movie comes out on February the 18th at the Bassett Place Mall. 8 Murders a Day, and the website is the number 8murdersaday.com. I don't know if that was mentioned or not.
That's good. So we want to be sure and put that right here also at the end of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Leon Blevins, El Paso Community College.